The air in the Lyria Interstellar War College lecture hall was cool, filtered, and smelled faintly of ozone. Rows of cadets from a dozen species sat in attentive silence, their eyes fixed on the central demonstration stage. Among them, Jay sat perfectly still. His uniform, standard human issue, felt stiff compared to the flowing organic armor of the Tarkelians or the shimmering scales of the Ventaxi. On the stage, Kale of the Tarkelian Empire moved with a liquid grace that seemed to ignore normal physics. Her form was humanoid but elongated, with skin the color of polished pewter. Her most striking feature was the set of 3 large, jet-black eyes arranged in a triangle on her face. They moved independently, yet all focus was directed at the far end of the hall where a series of complex targets shimmered into existence. "Observation is the first pillar of the shot," Kale said. Her voice a smooth, melodic tone translated through the universal implants. "Calculation is the second. The third is the absolute union of tool and mind." She raised her weapon. It was not a rifle as humans understood it. It was a living piece of Tarkelian biotech, a sleek, pulsing shape that seemed to grow from her armored glove. A neural tendril connected it directly to a port at the base of her skull. The targets began to move. They were small, fast, and wove through a holographic obstacle course of floating energy rings and shifting barriers. Kale did not seem to aim. She simply looked, and the weapon in her hands moved with her. A beam of condensed plasma, silent and bright, lanced out. One target vaporized, then another. She fired 5 times in rapid succession. Each shot was perfect. Each target was gone before it could change direction. The final target, programmed to dart behind a solid-looking energy barrier, was struck the moment it peeked out. Kale had fired before it appeared, her linked system predicting its path with flawless accuracy. A soft murmur of appreciation went through the alien cadets. Jay watched, his face a calm mask. Beside him, Mina leaned forward, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She was smaller than Jay, with an energy that seemed to vibrate right through her uniform. Where Jay was a still pond, Mina was a jumping spark. Kale lowered her weapon. The neural tendril retracted. She turned to face the audience, her 3 eyes scanning them in a way that felt deeply unsettling. "The Tarkelian philosophy is one of perfect elimination," she stated. "We remove variables. We control the battlefield. We achieve a state of artistic purity in our craft. This requires a tool that is an extension of the self and a mind trained for absolute focus." Her central eye settled on the small cluster of human cadets. "This is why we study your military doctrines with curiosity. You cling to physical, manual weapons. You value traits you call grit and improvisation. These are not virtues. They are admissions of failure. They mean your technology is crude and your planning is imperfect. You send your soldiers into chaos and hope their primitive instincts will save them." The hall grew quieter. A Ventaxi cadet clicked its beak softly. Mina's jaw tightened. "You see," Kale continued, a note of cool pity entering her voice. "You train soldiers, beings who follow orders, who operate within strict, simple protocols. You hope their courage will fill the gaps left by their inferior tools and their chaotic methods. We do not have soldiers. We have artists of demise. Every action is calculated. Every outcome is known. There is no chaos. Only a perfect, executed design." Jay felt the words, but they landed on the hard soil of his memory. They didn't spark anger, but a cold, clear recollection. He didn't think of a battlefield. He thought of water. Brown, churning, violent water swallowing the streets of his hometown. He remembered the loudspeakers of the army units, full of static and orders that made no sense against the scale of the disaster. The real work hadn't come from the soldiers with their standard-issue gear and protocols. It had come from old Mr. Park, the mechanic, who used his tow truck cable to make a safety line. It had come from the fishing boat crews who piloted their vessels down the main road. It had come from the cacophony of yelling, of people trying anything that might work. That wasn't protocol. It was something else. Something alive and desperate and brilliantly effective. Mina's hand was a fist on her knee. She's reducing centuries of tactical adaptation to a soundbite, she whispered, hot with indignation. Kale concluded her demonstration. The upcoming Vorlon shoot will, as always, demonstrate the superiority of precision over passion, of calculation over courage. I look forward to the participation of our human colleagues. It is instructive to see the limits of a philosophy built on disorder. The demonstration ended. Cadets began to file out, talking in low tones about the perfect shots. Jay stood slowly. Mina immediately turned to him, her eyes blazing. Did you hear that? Artists of demise? What pretentious, frozen spit nonsense. We have to answer that, Jay. We have to. Jay looked at her. How? With a lecture on human spirit. She would not understand. Not a lecture, Mina said, a fierce grin spreading across her face. With the Vorlon shoot, you're entering. Jay almost laughed. It was a short, quiet sound. Me? No. I am a conscript who got good with a standard rifle because I had to. That is all. I am not an artist. Exactly, Mina said, grabbing his arm. You're not. You're a fighter. You see things differently. I've watched you in The Sims. You don't take the shots they teach. You make shots they never imagined. You used a refraction from a communication beam to hit a target last week. That's not in any Tarkelian manual. Jay looked toward the stage where Kale was being congratulated by her peers. She represented an idea of war as a clean, superior science. His memory was of a dirty, desperate, and very human struggle against a flooding river. One was about control. The other was about survival by any means possible. The shoot is for champions, Mina. For specialists with the best gear. I have a kinetic rifle. It shoots solid bullets. It is simple and basic. And it will work when her fancy toy fails, Mina insisted. When the problem can't be calculated. You know it can. You've lived it. Jay was silent. He saw the floodwaters again. He saw the chaotic, beautiful, life-saving mess of human ingenuity. He was not a champion. He was just someone who had learned, in the worst way, how to fight when all the plans were washed away. Think about it, Mina said, her voice dropping. Not for glory, just to show that chaos has its own answer. That a fighter can do what a soldier cannot. She walked away, leaving him in the murmuring hall. Jay stood alone, the echo of Kale's perfect shots and her mocking words hanging in the ozone-scented air, now mixed with the old, relentless memory of rising water and shouting voices. The argument continued in the Human Cadets Lounge, a small room that felt cramped under the weight of Mina's determination. She paced back and forth on the tough synthetic carpet. Jay sat on a low sofa, his hands resting on his knees, looking at the floor. You don't understand the opportunity, Mina said, her voice tight with frustration. It's not about winning a trophy. It's about the statement. Right now, every species here thinks Kale is right. They think human tactics are just noise and luck. We need to show them the method inside our noise. Jay finally looked up. His face was calm, but his eyes were distant. You want me to be a symbol, Mina. I am not a symbol. I am a person who joined to get training to help. That is all. But you see things, Mina pressed, stopping her pacing to face him. In the tactical simulations, when everyone else is trying to solve the puzzle by the rules, you change the puzzle. Last month, in the urban rescue sim, you didn't follow the marked breach points. You collapsed an unstable wall to create a smokescreen and went through the sewer line. The instructors were angry, but you saved the simulation civilians 3 minutes faster than anyone else. That was different, Jay said. That was a simulation of disaster. It felt real. It was real thinking, Mina exclaimed. She sat down across from him. That's what she doesn't get. You don't just follow the scenario given. You interact with it. You change the environment to suit your goal. That is what a fighter does. A soldier completes the mission as given. A fighter achieves the objective, no matter how. Jay was quiet for a long moment. The lounge's lighting was a soft yellow, unlike the harsh white of the lecture hall. Felt more human. It made the memory come back stronger. You want to know why I really don't want to do it? he asked, his voice low. Mina nodded, her expression softening. It reminds me of the flood. Not the shooting. The being watched. The being expected to perform when things are impossible. He began to speak, his words slow and careful. He told her about the endless rain, the river swallowing the banks. He was on leave visiting his family. The official alerts came too late. Then the army trucks arrived, but the water came faster. The soldiers, good men, were trained to secure areas and wait for engineers and boats. Their protocols were for order. The water was chaos. So they were setting up a perimeter, Jay said. But my aunt's house was in the low street. The water was already at the windows. We could hear people inside. The sergeant said we had to wait for the proper equipment. It was the rule. Mina listened, completely still. Then old Mr. Kim from the auto shop came running with a giant spool of steel cable. He yelled, "We are not waiting." He tied it to his tow truck. Some fishermen brought their small boat on a trailer. They launched it in the middle of the street. It was madness. People were yelling different ideas, no one in charge. My cousin, a welder, used his torch to cut a hole in a second-floor balcony railing. They hooked the cable to the boat, people pulled from the truck, and they used the boat to ferry people from the house to the balcony. It was ugly. It was dangerous. The cable snapped once. But they saved 17 people before the engineers even arrived. He looked at Mina. The soldiers followed their training. They were soldiers. The civilians, they had no training for that. But they fought. They used what they knew, trucks, cables, boats, torches, to solve a problem no one had a manual for. That is what you are talking about. That is not a marksmanship competition. That is a flood. Mina's eyes were bright. Yes, that's exactly it, Jay. The Vorlon chute isn't a clean firing range. It's a flood. It's a chaotic, changing problem. Kale has her perfect tool for perfect conditions. But what happens when the conditions are imperfect? Who is better prepared? The artist with the perfect brush? Or the fighter who will use mud and a stick to get the job done? She leaned forward. Your rifle is your cable. Your knowledge is your welder's torch. The chute is the flooded street. You don't have to be the best shot in the galaxy. You just have to be the best at solving the shooting problem they give you by any means necessary. Jay felt the truth of her words settle in his stomach. It was a cold, heavy feeling. It was responsibility. He hated the memory of the flood, the fear, the choking water, the screams. But he also remembered the fierce joy when the first person came across on that wobbly boat. The raw, shouting triumph of it. They will laugh, he said quietly, when they see my name, when they see my weapon. Let them, Mina said, a fierce smile on her face. Let Kale laugh. It will make the lesson clearer in the end. You are not entering to prove human marksmanship is better. You are entering to prove the human mind is more adaptable. We don't just endure chaos. We use it. Jay took a deep breath. He saw the faces of the people from his town, covered in mud and exhausted, cheering as the last person was pulled to safety. They were not soldiers. They were fighters. He had been both that day. A soldier waiting for orders and then, finally, a fighter wading into the water with a rope. Okay, he said. The word was simple. It was not a shout of determination. It was an acceptance. A decision. Mina's smile widened. Good. I will handle the entry. You just think about floods and cables. Later, alone in his small sleeping quarters, Jay took out his service rifle. It was a Model 7 kinetic rifle. It fired solid, chemically propelled slugs. It had a standard optical scope, an adjustable stock, and a barrel that needed cleaning after every use. It was simple, mechanical, and utterly dependent on the person holding it. There was no neural link. It did not predict. It only did what he told it to do. He held it, feeling its familiar weight. He was not an artist. This was not a brush. It was a tool, a very basic tool, for a job that might require something more than just shooting. He would enter the Vorlon chute. He would walk into that arena with his simple tool and his memory of muddy water. And he would see what happened. The Vorlon chute was not held on a simple range. It took place in the college's massive adaptive terrain arena, a dome where the environment could be changed in an instant. The viewing galleries were packed with cadets and instructors from every species. A low hum of conversation filled the air. Jay stood at the entrance to the competitor's bay. He wore a standard light combat suit. His Model 7 rifle felt heavy in his hands. Around him were 9 other shooters. There was a Ventaxi with a long, needle-like rifle that seemed to be made of crystal. A hulking Brundian with a weapon that looked more like a cannon. And there was Kale. She looked like a statue of polished metal and purpose. Her biotech rifle was alive, a slight pulse of violet light moving along its length. She did not look at the other competitors. She was calm, centered, ready to execute her art. Mina was in the stands, leaning forward so far she was almost over the rail. She gave Jay a sharp nod. He did not nod back. He was focusing on his breathing. In and out. Simple. A neutral electronic voice echoed through the dome. Competitors, proceed to your starting markers. The first environment will begin in 60 seconds. Jay walked to a circle of light on the floor. The dome above them shimmered. The clean, flat floor of the bay vanished. Suddenly, Jay was standing on a slope of rough, blue-gray rock. The sky above was a deep blue, but it felt wrong. The gravity was different. It was lighter, then heavier, like a slow, pulsing wave. It made his stomach feel strange. 10 small, silver drone targets zipped into the air from behind distant rock spires. They moved in quick, zigzag patterns. The other shooters reacted immediately. The Ventaxi crouched, its crystal rifle making a high-pitched whine as it fired beams of light. The Brundian planted its feet and fired thunderous bolts of energy. Kale simply stood. Her rifle came up as if lifted by an invisible hand. It fired. A plasma bolt curved smoothly around a rock and vaporized a target. She fired again. Another hit. Each shot was a clean, efficient line from her rifle to the target. She moved with the gravity shifts as if they were nothing. Jay raised his own rifle. The stock felt wrong against his shoulder in the shifting gravity. He tried to track a target. He fired. The solid slug, designed for Earth-normal gravity, flew straight, but the target had already jerked away. He missed. He took another breath. He thought of the feeling of the current in the flood, pulling at his legs. You don't fight the current directly. You use its force. He stopped trying to stand perfectly still. He let the wave of heavier gravity pull him down into a crouch. As it lightened, he pushed up, using the motion to swing his rifle up towards a target. He let it more, guessing where the weird gravity would push his bullet. He fired. A spark. A hit. The target spun and fell. It was not clean. It was not pretty. He had to shoot 3 times to hit one target where Kale needed only one. But he was hitting them. He was adapting. The electronic voice spoke. Environment shift. The rocky landscape melted away. The air turned thick and green. A blinding, acidic mist swirled around them. Jay's eyes burned instantly. He heard the hiss of the other shooters' environmental systems activating. Their helmets sealed. Kale's own helmet seemed to flow from the collar of her armor. A seamless bubble. Jay had only his standard suit and a simple visor. He pulled it down, but the mist stuck to it, making it hard to see. The targets here were slow, hovering orbs that glowed faintly in the fog. But they were shielded by a shimmering, refractive field that made them look like they were in 3 different places at once. He could hear the other weapons firing. The beams and bolts looked distorted in the mist. Many missed. Kale was firing, but even her shots were going wide. The refractive shield was confusing her targeting system. For the first time, she paused. Her 3 eyes narrowed behind her helmet. Jay blinked tears from his stinging eyes. He could barely see. This was worse than the flood. This was a hot, blinding cloud. He thought of the moment in the flood when the cable snapped. The sudden panic. The feeling of everything going wrong. The solution hadn't been to find a new cable. It had been for 5 people to jump into the water and form a human chain while someone else found more rope. He looked at the mist on his visor. He looked at the wet, conductive droplets in the air. He looked at his simple, kinetic rifle. It fired a solid piece of metal. An idea, ugly and desperate, formed. He raised his rifle, but he did not aim at the target. He aimed at a cluster of thick, dangling vines hanging between him and one of the glowing orbs. He fired. The bullet tore through the vines. It didn't hit the target, but the impact sent a shower of sap and water flying into the air right in front of the orb's shield. The refractive field flickered. For a split second, the electrical distortion caused by the conductive sap hitting the shield cleared the visual distortion. The orb's true location was visible. Jay was already moving. He shifted his aim the tiniest amount and fired a second shot through the clearing mist. A direct hit. The orb shattered with a satisfying pop. He did it again for another target, using his bullet to knock debris from a rock into the shield's path. It was wasteful. It used 2 or 3 bullets for one target. But it worked. In the stands, Mina was on her feet, pointing and yelling something he couldn't hear. Kale had seen it. She watched Jay's method. She saw him not fighting the mist, but using it. Her face, behind her helmet, showed a flicker of something. Not anger, but deep confusion. This was not calculation. This was interference. It was messy. It was an atrocity against the pure art of the shot. She solved her own problem a moment later. She fired a wide-area plasma burst that superheated the mist in a large cone, temporarily dispersing it and overloading the shield with heat. She hit her target. It was a brilliant, powerful solution. It used a huge amount of her weapon's energy, but it was clean in its own way. Jay saw it. He understood the difference. Her solution was to erase the problem with superior force. His was to use the problem as a tool. Both had worked. The environment shifted again. Jay was breathing hard. His eyes still burned. He had used more ammunition than anyone else. He was not in the lead, but he was still in the competition. He had not been eliminated. As the new landscape formed around them, a field of floating, rotating metallic plates, Jay saw Kale glance at him. Just for a second. Her 3 eyes took in his basic rifle, his simple suit, his face set in determined concentration. The pity was gone from her look. Now there was only a cold, focused curiosity. The human was not following any script she knew. He was fighting the course itself. And he was still here. The new environment was a silent nightmare of geometry. Giant metallic plates, each the size of a ground car, floated in the air. They rotated slowly, creating a maze of moving walls. The light was a dull gray here. The only sound was the deep, low hum of the plates moving on their magnetic fields. The electronic voice announced the challenge. Eliminate the silent observer targets. Time limit, 90 seconds. Small, black disc-like targets, no bigger than a hand, zipped into the maze. They made no sound. They darted through the gaps between the plates, appearing and disappearing in flashes. The other shooters began to fire immediately. Energy bolts slammed into the metal plates, leaving glowing scorch marks. The targets were too fast, too hidden. Shots were wasted. Kale did not fire. She stood perfectly still, her 3 eyes tracking the paths of the discs. Her rifle was part of her, an extra sense. She was computing, waiting for the perfect moment where a target's path would be clear. It was a test of patience and prediction. Jay felt a wave of cold frustration. He couldn't see the targets. He couldn't predict their paths. He had maybe 20 bullets left. He couldn't waste them shooting at metal. He moved. It was not a calculated move. It was an instinct. He ran forward, ducking under a slowly spinning plate. The hum was everywhere, vibrating in his bones. He needed to see. He needed to change the game. He remembered a moment from the flood. After the cable snapped, the boat was drifting towards a raging side channel. Everyone was yelling. Someone threw a rope, but it fell short. In that moment of panic, Jay's cousin, the welder, hadn't looked for a better rope. He had grabbed a long metal pole from a shattered shop sign. He didn't throw it. He used it to push off from the wall of a building, steering the boat just enough for the rope to be caught. You used what you had to change the situation. Jay looked up at the giant plates. They were obstacles. But they were also the biggest thing in the arena. He raised his rifle. He did not aim at a target. He aimed at the edge of one of the floating plates. He fired. The kinetic slug hit the plate with a loud clang that echoed through the dome. The impact was small, but it was on the very edge. The plate, perfectly balanced on magnetic fields, shuddered. The slow rotation changed. It began to tilt. Jay fired again at the same spot. Clang. The tilt became a wobble. The plate was now turning in a different, unstable way. In the stands, Mina understood. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. "Yes," she whispered. "Change the board." The other shooters paused, confused by the sudden noise and the moving plate. Kale's focus broke for a second. One of her eyes flicked towards Jay, her expression one of pure disbelief. What was he doing? This was destruction. This was not marksmanship. Jay ignored them. He ran to another plate. He fired twice. Clang, clang. Another plate started to wobble on its axis. The moving plates began to interfere with each other. Their changed paths clashed. One plate clipped the edge of another. The deep hum became a grinding shriek of metal. The maze was no longer predictable. It was becoming chaotic. And in that chaos, the silent observer targets were affected. They were programmed to fly through the predicted gaps. Now the gaps were closing, moving unpredictably. One target flew straight into the path of a wobbling plate and was crushed. Jay saw another target zip out from behind a plate, confused by the new movement. It was in the open for just a moment. He fired. His bullet struck it cleanly. It shattered. He had not outshot the target. He had outthought the course. He had turned the test of precision into a test of adaptation. Kale recovered. She saw his strategy. A flare of something hot. Maybe anger, maybe competition, lit behind her eyes. She could not control the plates, but she could adapt to the new chaos faster than anyone. Her mind and weapon worked together, tracking the new, chaotic paths. She began to fire, her plasma bolts weaving through the moving obstacles, striking two targets in quick succession. She was learning from him in her own way. She was using the chaos he created. But it was not her art. It was a reaction, and Jay could see it cost her something. Her calm was gone. Her movements were sharper, more urgent. Jay took down one more target by firing at a plate above it, making it drop suddenly and trap the target against another plate. He didn't shoot the target. He let the environment do the work. The electronic voice rang out. Time. The giant plates froze in place. The humming stopped. The silence felt heavy. Jay was breathing hard, sweat cooling on his face. He looked at his ammunition counter. He had 6 bullets left. Only 4 competitors remained. The Ventaxi was gone. The Brundian was gone. It was Kale, Jay, and 2 other specialists from advanced species. They all looked at Jay now, not with mockery but with a wary new assessment. This human was not just stubborn. He was disruptive. He fought the Vorlon chute itself. As the arena dissolved back to its neutral state, Kale walked over to him. She stopped a few feet away. Her 3 eyes looked him up and down, from his basic rifle to his tired face. "That was not shooting," she said, her melodic voice flat. "That was vandalism." Jay met her gaze. He was too tired for fear. "It was effective," he said simply. "You introduced variables. You broke the system," she said. "The system was a problem," Jay replied, thinking of the flood, of the broken cable, of the rules that didn't fit the reality. "I found a different solution." Kale stared at him for a long moment. She seemed to be searching for a word. Finally, she found it. "You are a fighter." She said the word like it was a strange, unclean thing. Then she turned and walked away to prepare for the final round. Jay stood alone in the center of the empty dome. He heard Mina cheering from far away. He looked at his hands. They were steady. He had not won, but he had changed the fight. He had proven that, in an unpredictable world, the person willing to change the game itself could still compete. He had 6 bullets left and 1 final round to go. He had no idea what it would be, but for the first time he felt a small, hard spark of certainty. He would not try to beat Kale at her own art. He would make the final round his own kind of fight. The final round was between 3 competitors. Kale, Jay, and Allure, a slender being whose weapon fired silent, vibrating needles. The stands were completely silent. The air in the adaptive terrain arena was cool and still, waiting. Jay stood on his marker. He checked his rifle for the 10th time. 6 bullets. He felt their weight in the magazine. They were all he had left. He closed his eyes for a second. He wasn't thinking of the crowd or Kale. He was thinking of the cold. Not the cold of space, but the deep, bone-aching cold of floodwater. The memory came to him now not as a story but as a feeling. The moment he had waded into the current to help form the human chain. The water had been so cold it stole his breath. The current pulled hard, threatening to take his feet out from under him. The people on either side of him, strangers and neighbors, linked arms. They were yelling, not in fear, but in a constant stream of communication. Step left. Rock below. Hold me. It wasn't organized. It was a living, shouting network, adapting to every new danger the water threw at them. They weren't trying to control the river. They were trying to survive it long enough to get people to safety. They used the current itself, sometimes letting it push a person towards the chain where they could be grabbed. They used debris as stepping stones. The plan changed every second. There was no single leader. Every person was a thinker, a fighter, using their own 2 eyes and their own mind to solve the immediate problem in front of them. That was the lesson. It wasn't about one brilliant idea. It was about 100 small, desperate, clever ideas happening at once. It was about being part of the chaos, not above it. The electronic voice spoke, pulling him back. Final challenge. The hydrocore shield. You will have 1 shot. The center of the arena shimmered. Column of water appeared. But it was not normal water. It was a thick, churning, turbulent fluid that glowed with a faint blue light. It twisted and turned in a complex, unpredictable pattern, like a tornado made of liquid. It was beautiful and terrifying. Behind this wall of moving fluid, on a small platform, a single red target sensor glowed. It was the size of a coin. The target sensor is exposed at random intervals within the hydrocore, the voice explained. The pattern is non-repeating. No predictive algorithm can solve it. You must pierce the shield and strike the sensor. Each competitor will have 1 attempt. The order will be random. The lore was selected first. It approached the swirling column of liquid. It raised its needle rifle. It waited, its whole body still. Minutes passed. The fluid never showed the same movement twice. Suddenly, a small gap seemed to open, and the red sensor flashed into view. The lore fired. Its vibrating needle shot forward. But the gap had already closed. The fluid, dense and strange, caught the needle. The powerful vibrations were absorbed and dispersed in the churning currents. The needle was deflected, spinning harmlessly away to clatter on the floor. The lore made a soft, disappointed click and stepped back. Kale was next. She walked forward with calm authority. She stood before the hydrocore, her 3 eyes moving independently, tracking the flow. Her biotech rifle connected to her with its neural tendril. She was not just looking. She was analyzing. The violet light along her rifle pulsed faster. She stood for a long time. The crowd watched, breathless. Jay watched her face. He saw the first hint of tension around her eyes. Her system was searching for a pattern. It was calculating millions of possibilities per second. But the voice had said it was non-repeating. There was no pattern. A flicker of frustration crossed her features. Her art required a system to master. This was pure chaos. She decided to force it. She would use power. She aimed her rifle. She waited for a moment when the fluid seemed slightly thinner. She fired a focused, high-intensity plasma bolt. It was a magnificent shot. It screamed through the air, a line of pure energy. It hit the fluid wall, and it did nothing. The churning, energy-dispersing liquid swallowed the plasma bolt whole. The bolt broke apart, its energy spreading out in a harmless blue shimmer across the surface of the hydrocore before fading. It was like throwing a stone into a stormy ocean. Kale fired again in rapid succession, 2 more bolts. Each one was absorbed and dispersed. The target sensor remained untouched, glowing mockingly behind the impossible shield. She lowered her rifle. The neural tendril went slack. Her face was a mask of cold anger now, mixed with disbelief. She turned to the judge's booth. "This test is flawed," she stated, her voice cutting through the silence. "It is not a test of skill. It is a test of chance. My tools are designed for precision. This is anarchy." She turned and walked back to her marker, her pride wounded. She had not even come close. All eyes turned to Jay. He was last. He had 6 bullets in a simple rifle. Kale had declared the problem unsolvable. The lore had failed. The mood in the dome was one of resigned conclusion. The hydrocore was the winner. Mina watched, her heart pounding. She had no idea what he could do. Jay walked forward. He stopped before the twisting, glowing column of liquid. The sound of it was a low roar, like a distant waterfall. He felt the spray on his face. It was cold. He looked at it. He did not look for a gap. He did not try to calculate. He remembered the feeling of the floodwater pulling at him. He remembered the way the current could be used, if you were brave enough and stupid enough to get inside it. He was not looking at a shield. He was looking at a river that was in his way. A soldier waits for the right shot. A fighter makes the shot right. He raised his rifle. He did not aim at the tiny red sensor hidden behind the chaos. He aimed directly into the heart of the churning, turbulent hydrocore itself. The silence in the dome was absolute. Every eye was fixed on Jay. He held his simple rifle pointed not at the target, but at the violent, swirling wall of liquid. It made no sense. It looked like surrender or madness. Kale watched from her marker, her 3 eyes wide with confusion. Was the human so defeated he would waste his last shots on the shield itself? Jay took a slow breath. He wasn't thinking about angles or physics. He was thinking about the cable in the flood. When it had snapped, it hadn't just fallen. It had whipped back through the air with terrifying force, controlled by nothing but the raging water. Chaos had a power of its own. You couldn't fight it head-on, but you could maybe borrow a piece of it. He pulled the trigger. The sound was a sharp, simple crack in the quiet dome. The solid slug, a piece of shaped metal, flew straight and true into the glowing blue fluid. It did not behave like the lore's needle or Kale's plasma. It was heavy, dumb, and kinetic. It hit the turbulent current and did not simply get absorbed. It was punched into the chaos. The effect was immediate and strange. The slug, designed to penetrate armor, began to tumble. The unpredictable forces of the hydrocore grabbed it, twisting it, breaking its clean path. But the slug fought back, transferring its energy into the fluid around it. For a brief moment, right where the slug was tumbling, the complex flow of the liquid was disrupted. The beautiful, programmed turbulence was infected by a wild, new variable. The swirling patterns rippled and fought against themselves. A temporary knot of confusion formed in the shield. Jay did not wait. He fired again. A second slug punched into the same area. The disruption grew. The knot of turbulence became a small, violent storm within the larger storm. The fluid there churned in a new, even more chaotic way. It was like throwing 2 rocks into a fast stream right next to each other. The water didn't just swallow them. It splashed, frothed, and created new currents. In the stands, Mina was leaning so far forward she had to hold the rail to keep from falling. Her mind was racing, seeing it. He wasn't trying to go through the shield. He was trying to change the shield. Jay fired a 3rd shot, then a 4th. Each slug was a hammer blow to the logic of the hydrocore. The area he was targeting was now a mess of conflicting energies. The glowing blue light flickered wildly there. He had 2 bullets left. He could feel the clock ticking. He could feel the eyes of the galaxy on him. But he only felt the cold spray on his face and the memory of the river's pull. He shifted his aim just a little. He fired his 5th bullet, not into the heart of the chaos he had created, but just to the side of it. The slug hit the edge of the turbulent knot. It acted like a final, precise nudge. The chaotic pocket of fluid he had created suddenly pinched inward and then, for less than a second, it parted. It wasn't a clean, round hole. It was a ragged, temporary tear in the fabric of the shield. A tunnel of clearer air, twisting and unstable, punched through the glowing blue toward the target platform. And through that fleeting, ugly tunnel, the red sensor was perfectly visible. Jay's mind was empty of thought. His body moved. It was the last move in a desperate physical fight. He swung his rifle, leading the moving tear in the fluid. He did not have time to aim perfectly. He had only time to trust his hands, his eyes, and the chaos he had made. He fired his sixth and final bullet. The slug screamed down the barrel and into the temporary tunnel. The tear in the hydrocore was already collapsing, the programmed flow reasserting itself, swallowing the chaos. The bullet flew true. It entered the tunnel just as the liquid walls began to close around it. It did not fly straight. The last edges of turbulence caught it, spinning it, making it wobble. It became a piece of living chaos itself. It ricocheted off the inside of one collapsing liquid wall with a wet spang of sound. Tumbled, hitting the other side, changing direction again. It was no longer a aimed shot. It was a desperate thing, bouncing through a closing corridor. Then it was through. The tunnel collapsed completely behind it, the hydrocore flowing smooth again as if nothing had happened. The bullet, its energy almost spent, spun through the clear air behind the shield. It was off target. It was going to miss the sensor to the left. Its final wobble, caused by the last impact, brought its ragged nose around. It struck the edge of the platform, sparking. The impact flipped it up in a tiny, pathetic arc. It dropped, nose down, onto the center of the glowing red sensor. There was a loud, definitive click. The red light went out. For a moment, nothing happened. The hydrocore continued to swirl. Jay stood, his rifle empty, his body aching. The dome was silent. Then, a holographic sign shimmered into the air above the arena. Target neutralized. Challenge complete. The silence broke. It was not a cheer, not at first. It was a wave of sound from hundreds of voices. Gasps, exclamations, barks of disbelief in a dozen languages. It was the sound of a universe's understanding being broken. Kale stood frozen. Her three eyes were locked on the now-dark sensor. Her mind, built for calculation, tried and failed to process what she had seen. It had not been a shot. It had been a catastrophe. A calculated catastrophe. He had used the unsolvable problem as his tool. He had not pierced the shield. He had convinced the shield to pierce itself, for just long enough to let a piece of wild luck through. Jay lowered his rifle. He felt no triumph. He felt only a deep, hollow exhaustion and the distant echo of cold floodwater. He had not made a perfect shot. He had made a perfect mess. And it had worked. The uproar in the dome did not stop. It was a storm of noise. Cadets were standing, pointing, arguing. Instructors were huddled together, their faces showing shock and intense discussion. The holographic sign still glowed in the air. A silent, undeniable fact. Jay stood in the center of it all. He felt disconnected, like the sound was coming from far away. He ejected the empty magazine from his rifle with a soft click. The simple, mechanical sound grounded him. It was over. He had no more bullets. He had done all he could. He turned and began the long walk back to the competitor's bay. The path felt longer than before. Eyes followed him. Alien eyes of every shape and color, filled with emotions he could not name. It was not the friendly respect given to a champion. It was something deeper, more unsettled. It was the look people give to a force of nature, something unpredictable and new. He saw Mina pushing her way down from the stands, her face lit up with a fierce joy. But before she could reach him, another figure stepped into his path. Kale. She moved to stand before him, blocking his way. The noise around them seemed to fade. Her three eyes were fixed on him. The cold anger was gone from her face. In its place was a stark, intense curiosity. She looked at him as if she were seeing a new species for the first time. "You did not hit the target," she said. Her melodic voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the background roar. Jay stopped. He met her gaze. He was too tired to be afraid. Yes, I did. No, she insisted, shaking her head slowly. You struck it, but you did not hit it. A hit is a controlled event, a meeting of aim and opportunity. What you did, she searched for the word again. That was an accident. A lucky accident created by violence against the problem itself. Jay considered this. He thought of the flood, of the final lunge to grab a child the current was pulling away. It had not been a graceful rescue. It had been a desperate, stumbling grab that only worked because 3 other people were also grabbing, slipping, and yelling. Was that an accident? Or was it the result of putting yourself in a position where an accident could save the day? It was a solution, Jay said simply. It was an atrocity against physics. Kale's voice rose, not in anger, but in pure, frustrated wonder. You did not solve the shield. You attacked it until it flinched. You made it so chaotic that for one moment it created its own failure. That is not marksmanship. It is sabotage of reality. Maybe reality needs sabotaging sometimes, Jay said. He thought of the rules that said to wait for boats while people drowned. When the problem is too perfect, too strong, you have to change the problem. Kale fell silent. She studied him, his worn rifle, his basic uniform, his calm, tired face. You speak of the flood your friend mentioned. This is what you learned there? To fight the water instead of the person drowning. No, Jay said. He found the words coming more easily now. You cannot fight a flood. You cannot control it. You learn to move with it, to use what it does, to let its power help you even just a little, for just a second. The cable broke, so we used our bodies. The path was blocked, so we made a new one. That is what a fighter does. A soldier follows the plan for crossing a river. A fighter gets to the other side, no matter what is in the way. He saw her understanding then. It did not bring happiness to her face. It brought a kind of solemn gravity. Her art was built on control, on making the universe obey a perfect plan. His was built on reacting, on bending, on using the universe's own chaos as a weapon. They were opposites. You train for the perfect battle, Jay said quietly. We train for the imperfect one, because every real battle is imperfect. Kale took a step back. She gave a slow, single nod. It was not a nod of agreement, but of recognition. She saw the distinction now, clear and hard as diamond. Soldiers for order, fighters for chaos, and in a universe that was fundamentally chaotic, which was more dangerous. Mina finally reached them, breathless. She looked between Jay and Kale, sensing the heavy understanding that passed between them. She said nothing. Kale looked at Jay one last time. You are correct, she said, her voice formal. I mocked humanity for training soldiers. I was wrong. You do not train soldiers. She paused, letting the words hang. You train fighters. It is a different thing, a terrifying thing. She turned and walked away, her polished armor reflecting the arena lights. She did not look back. The story spread through the war college like energy through a circuit. It was not the story of a human winning a shooting contest. Humans did not win the Vorlon shoot that year. The judges, after hours of debate, ruled Jay's method outside the parameters of traditional marksmanship. The trophy went to a different species. But that did not matter. The story that spread was about the empty rifle, the 6 bullets, and the hydrocore that flinched. It was about the flood and the cable and the difference between a soldier's perfect plan and a fighter's perfect reaction. In the days that followed, Jay noticed a change. The alien cadets did not mock him. They watched him. They asked careful questions about human history, about disaster response, about adaptive tactics. The word fighter was used now with a new tone, not of pity, but of wary respect. He had not won a prize, but he had taught a lesson. In a universe of perfect artists, there was now a known, unsettling truth. Humanity did not bring soldiers to a fight. They brought problem solvers who were not afraid to break the problem itself. And in an imperfect universe, that was a very powerful thing to be.